All right, now we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce you to a story grid. These story grids have been used for thousands of years. There are basically 7 stories that get told in the world today. If you go to a movie, you're seeing one of 7 story formulas, guaranteed. It's the only story formulas that actually work. If you break these rules, people will stop paying attention. If you break these rules in your marketing and your messaging, and to some degree in your business strategy, your customers will stop paying attention, I guarantee you. That's the first bad news of the day. The first bad news of the day is this: stories are based on formulas. You are being tricked into continuing to pay attention. And listen, I study stories for a living. I've written books about stories. I've been lecturing about this forever. Those tricks still work on me. In fact, everybody asks, have you seen Game of Thrones? I will not watch Game of Thrones because I know how it works. I'm going to be trapped on my couch for a week finishing Game of Thrones. I don't have the time. I made the mistake about 2 weeks ago of watching the first episode of a show called Tehran, new on Apple TV. I'm a 9 o'clock in bed, lights out, up early. Sure enough, 11 o'clock at night, which for me is 3 in the morning, I'm still watching Tehran because, dadgummit, they tricked me into watching the 2nd episode, then they tricked me into watching the 3rd episode. By the way, it's fantastic. If you want to throw away a weekend of your life, start Tehran tonight. If you don't get anything else out of this, watch that show. And it's these formulas that are keeping you paying attention. So how do we do this in our brands, in our brand script? And these are powerful formulas. They are predictable formulas. Psychologists, which is basically what a screenwriter is, has figured out how to make you pay attention. In fact, it's so formulaic that my wife hates going to movies with me because she knows at some point I'm going to elbow her and I'm going to say, that guy dies in about 31 minutes. And sure enough, he does every time. It's in the formula. So let's look at one of these formulas. I'll ruin movies for you forever, but I'm going to grow your business. If we can make that agreement with each other, we're going to be good. In fact, I'm just kidding. I always say I ruin movies, but actually you'll watch movies from 2 different perspectives. You'll get sucked into it just like I do. You're powerless against it. You are powerless against it. But you'll also come out and go, ooh, I bet you that's the guide, and this is the hero, and I bet you this is the Act 2 climax, and I bet you all this kind of stuff. You'll love studying it as well. And the more you study the movies that you watch, the more ideas you're going to get to grow your business. I guarantee you. It's really, really fun. All right, so I'm going to spend a little time looking at one of these formulas. You've got a grid, and your brand script grid is laid out in a grid that looks like this. These are 7 things that happen in every movie. And the very first thing that happens is a character shows up on the screen, okay? A character or a group of characters in a group protagonist narrative shows up on screen. And what we have to do right away is define something that the character wants. What is it that the character wants? Jason Bourne wants to know who he really is. Luke Skywalker wants to defeat the evil empire. Bridget Jones wants to be in a relationship with her boss. On and on. Now, there are 2 mistakes that amateur screenwriters make. They are the same mistakes that you are probably making in your business. The first mistake is this: they use too vague of language to define what the character wants. Okay? So if I were to say, hey guys, let's skip this afternoon session after lunch, let's skip it. There's a movie out that I want to go see. I want you to come with me. It's a movie about a guy looking for fulfillment. How many of you are interested in that movie? Thumbs down or thumbs up? Basically, I'm asking, am I more interesting than a guy looking for fulfillment? You're saying thumbs down. Okay, well, thumbs down. Here's why. It's too vague. It's just way too vague. Nobody's going to go see a movie about a guy looking for fulfillment. Our minds are having to burn too many calories to figure out what that movie might be about. It's the reason Jeb Bush lost the election. He was too vague in defining the question, what do I get if I vote for Jeb Bush? nobody could answer the question. Now, who's going to buy a product that nobody knows what you get if you buy it? Right? It's one of the reasons Donald Trump is not doing well. He has yet to define what we get if we vote for him for a second term. He hasn't defined it. Nobody goes to a voting booth and clicks nothing, right? This guy has to represent something. Here's what I get. Now, if people are looking at your website and they can't figure out what it is that you offer in, I think, 3 seconds, you're toast. You're done. Now, here's what happens when I go to your website. You're using vague language. You're saying things like, trust is the commodity we exchange. I actually saw that on a website once. I went to the website and said, trust is the commodity we exchange. What do you offer? I don't know. Trust, apparently. What happens to me if I buy it? I don't know. What problem do you solve? I don't know. What positive climactic scene am I going to experience if I buy your product? I don't know. Do you want to buy it? It costs $1,000. Definitely not. Because what are you asking me to buy? Vague nothingness. We need to be crystal clear about what we offer, and we cannot be vague. Now, the second mistake is like the first one. It causes people to burn too many calories to figure out your offer. The second mistake is that we list too many things that our customer wants. We list too many things that our customer wants. If I took you to a movie and Jason Bourne wanted to know who he really was, and he also wanted to lose 30 pounds, and he wanted to run a marathon, and he wanted to marry the woman, and he was thinking about adopting a cat, and he was doing research because he wanted to do it ethically. You know, he travels a lot. We have lost the plot of this movie. We are asking people to burn so many calories in order to follow the plot that they will begin to daydream. In fact, some of you have been in movies where you started daydreaming. And this is why. The movie broke the rule. Define what the hero wants. Keep it to one thing and make it simple. Don't be vague. And you say, Don, I got a problem. My company offers 27 solutions to 27 problems. What do I do? That is not a big problem, right? What you want to do is find the big offering that you have that all your revenue streams fit under. So Dave Ramsey is a friend, and we've been working with his team for years. They came up with all this without us. He's brilliant. Dave Ramsey gives financial advice. By the way, there's a clear villain. If I said, what's the villain in the Dave Ramsey story, you would say debt. You would say credit cards. That's a great brand script. What's the goal? To be debt-free. What's the climactic scene? The debt-free screen. You see how it's a narrative? You ask somebody, you know, if you name financial advisors, go out on the street and say, name 2 financial advisors. People can't name 2. They name 1. Dave Ramsey. Does he have the best advice? I think he has good advice. Does he have the best advice? Probably not. He has the clearest advice. He invites people into the clearest story, so he's going to win. That's why he makes a couple $100 million a year, telling people debt is bad, cut up their credit card, get out of debt. Very simple advice, and they pay him $200 million a year to give it to him. What are they paying for? Clarity, clarity, clarity. Especially with financial advice, because it's so complicated. It's so nuanced. It just makes people want to burn calories. What Dave Ramsey said is, I'm not going to make you burn any calories to understand how to manage your finances. We're going to do it really simply. And he's going to win. He defined financial peace as the one thing everybody wants. And then all his revenue streams fall under it. His books, his radio shows, his podcasts, his different divisions of the company all fall under one thing, financial peace. All right? So here's a question for you. What do you offer? What is the one thing that you offer? Okay? And on your brand script, either on this piece of paper or at mystorybrand.com, you can begin to fill this out. What does my customer want? What does my customer want? And that's the beginning of your brand script. And then you want to take that language and you want to make sure it's showing up on your website, showing up in your emails, showing up in your Facebook ads, showing up in your sales emails, in your elevator pitch, in your presentations. Take that language and repeat it over and over, because you now have the first plot point that you are going to guide people through as you take them through an exercise in memorization. Now, if you look at your workbook, I've got an example from a company called Circuit E-Bikes. I'm going to show you their website later because it's a really, really well-done website. And the reason it's a well-done website is because the company doesn't exist and my staff made the website. It's a fictional company. What do they want? They want a new way to get to work. So we define that in their brand script. I could have gone many directions. They want to save gas. They want to get more exercise. They want to be outdoors. But remember the rule? If you give too many people, if you give the audience too many things that the hero wants, you lose them. So here's what's hard about this process, you guys, and I want to give you a lot of comfort as I say this. You got to choose one, and you've got to leave a ton of good ideas on the cutting room floor. You cannot include all your good ideas, because when you do that, the messaging gets too complicated and people have to burn too many calories. When we were back in a live workshop, I would actually bring a bunch of 8-pound bowling balls and set them on the stage. And I would bring up somebody from the audience, and I would start talking about my company. I would say, you know, I have a company called StoryBrand. We help you clarify your message. And I would hand them an 8-pound bowling ball. And I would say it comes from the ancient art form of story, narrative structure, started with Plato and Aristotle. Then, I never did this, but that would be like taking Vaseline and putting it on the second bowling ball and handing it to them. Right? It's too slippery. You're causing me to work too hard to understand. And then if I hand them a third idea, it's a third bowling ball. Now, nobody can hold more than about 3 bowling balls. If you hand them the fourth, how many are they going to drop? All of them. So if you're saying, well, my company is about this and this and this, we're up to 3 bowling balls. As soon as you say it's also about this, they drop all 4. Not only that, but if they're even holding 2 or 3, they're burning way too many calories to follow you. So we got to be known for being about one thing. One thing. And that's what I want you to choose. What does the customer want? This is what they want as it relates to my brand. And we'll get to some Q&A closer to lunch so that I can answer some of your questions. But you want that to be at one thing. Okay, the next thing that you got to come up with in your messaging strategy is the problem. What problem is the hero encountering or experiencing? What problem? And the reason we have to tell them the problem is because if we don't, we will lose them completely. Stories don't work unless there is a problem. The problem is the hook. The problem is what makes them interested in your product. In fact, you know, I'm going to say this a lot throughout the day, but if you only get one thing from today's workshop, let it be this. Start talking about your customers' problems. If you want to make more money, start talking about your customers' problems. And here's why. There's only one reason people buy products and services, and that's to solve a problem. That's it. Now, if I say to you, what problem do you solve, and you can't answer it right away, you got a messaging problem. You've got to be able to communicate the problem that you solve. And it needs to be in succinct, clear language that you can repeat over and over. The problem is the hook. Until the hero has a problem, we do not have a story. In fact, let me tell you a story. I got a buddy who lives in Los Angeles, loves to play volleyball. He got a call from his friends down on the beach, said, hey, we're down here at the beach, we're playing volleyball. You want to take the day off and play volleyball? He said, yes. I love it. He's walking down to the beach. He sees his friends there on the sand playing volleyball. He joins them. They play 2 or 3 games. He's having a great time. The games all end in a tie. Then one of the other guys there at the beach says, hey, I'm hungry. You guys know where we can get some tacos? And my friend said, there's a taco shop right across the street. In fact, it's Tuesday. It's Taco Tuesday at half price. They go over, they start having some tacos. They get a brisket taco, they get a chicken taco, they get a veggie taco. They're great tacos. Okay, is this story interesting to you guys? Shake your head yes or no. Now, here's what your brain is doing. Your brain is waiting for the story to begin. You're literally saying, where's this going? When is it going to begin? And listen, in about 5 more seconds, you guys would actually stop paying attention to that story. Because your brain is doing what I told you your brain would do. It's checking out because we don't need the information. In other words, my story is failing to engage you, and you're going to start daydreaming. Well, what's really wrong with that story? What's really wrong with that story is there is no problem. The problem is the hook. So let's try it again. Got a buddy, loves to play volleyball. He lives in Los Angeles. Got a call from some of his friends saying, we're playing volleyball down at the beach. He says, I'm in. He walks down to the beach. He sees his friends on the sand playing volleyball, and an earthquake hits. He's down on all fours. It's a big one. And he looks up, and the beach divides, and half his friends fall into a hole in the ground. Better story than the last one or worse? Not better for the people who just fell into the ground. More engaged? Yeah, because there's a problem. And now we're wondering, are his friends okay? How's he going to get them out of the hole? You know, are there going to be Sharknadoes that come up and dive into the hole? What's the problem? The problem is what makes your story interesting. Okay, so now here's a great pro tip. Now here's the pro tip for you in business. If I printed out your landing page that you're creating, and I were to take a red Sharpie pen, and I were to circle every time you talked about your customers' problems, how many circles would I put on that page? The more circles, the more you'll sell. Guaranteed. In fact, what we do at my office is we have, on a really important launch, we'll have a war room day where we'll print out the landing page physically on paper. We'll print out the landing page. We'll tape it to a wall. We'll print out every single email in that sequence. And then I'll take a pink highlighter and I'll highlight every time we're talking about the customer's problems. So visually, I can look across my launch and see whether there's enough color on the page to make it an interesting story. And amazingly, last time we did this with a major product, a major new product we released, last time we did it, we almost didn't talk about their problem at all. We thought we were doing it. It's what we teach people to do. But, you know, you get to talking about all that you are offering and your bonus and your whatever, and pretty soon you realize, oh my word, we haven't talked about our customers' problems. Super easy problem to fix. You just go in and sprinkle some. You shouldn't have to feel this way, and our customers are struggling with X, and you start sprinkling that stuff in, and you have a much better launch. Much, much better launch. It's interesting, because the problem is the only thing that's interesting. Okay, now here's where I'm really going to ruin movies for you, because the problem is so important that we don't want to just talk about it once. We want to talk about it from 3 different perspectives. In movies, there are 3 levels of problems. In movies, there are 3 levels of problems: external, internal, and philosophical. You'll see that on your blank brand script. External, internal, and philosophical. External is usually the physical problem that the hero has to solve. The hero has to, for instance, disarm a bomb. Okay? Jason Bourne's got to disarm a bomb. And but if we just keep it at the physical problem, we'll lose the audience. The purpose of the external problem in the movie is to manifest an internal problem. Jason Bourne has to disarm a bomb, but 10 years ago, he tried to disarm a bomb, and he didn't get it right, and a bunch of people got hurt. And now he has a lot of self-doubt as to whether or not he can disarm the bomb. You see how the movie just got better? Didn't it? Yeah. The external problem manifests an internal problem. What does this mean for you? It means that companies tend to talk about the problem they solve, but human beings talk about their feelings about that problem. In other words, companies sell solutions to problems, but customers buy solutions to their feelings. They don't buy your product because you solve the problem. They buy the product because they're frustrated about the problem. And so when you say, you know how most families don't eat together anymore, and when they do, they don't eat healthy, which is making a lot of us feel guilty and like time is passing us by. and we're missing opportunities to be with our family. You see how I just enhanced it? It's not just the problem. I don't just solve your problem. I solve the way that problem is making you feel. Now, the third level of problem, and by the way, write that down. I don't just solve a problem. I solve the way that problem is making you feel. So when you talk about the way your customers feel about that problem, you just increase the value of the product using words. You just increase the value of the product or perceived value of the product using words. That's amazing. Okay? Now, the third level of problems is philosophical. So philosophical are the shoulds and the oughts, and you shouldn't have to feel this way, and it's wrong for you to feel this way. In our story of Jason Bourne disarming a bomb, these are terrorists who are planning these bombs. So it's tyranny against democracy. It's selfishness versus altruism. The philosophical stakes are high. Okay, I'm going to explain more of that in just a second, but I want you to write down 3 questions for me. And it's going to help you understand external, internal, and philosophical. The 3 questions are these. What problem do I solve? Or my products or my services, whatever. What problem do I solve? How is that problem making my customers feel? Why is it just plain wrong that they should have to experience this problem? Why is it just plain wrong? Right there, just that is a great elevator pitch. Right? You know, most families don't eat together anymore. Problem. And it's making us feel guilty and like time is passing us by. We've only got so long to bond as a family. Internal. External, internal. You know, it's wrong that families don't spend much time together anymore. Philosophical. External, internal, philosophical. All in 5 seconds. So what happens is I open up a story gap. You got a problem. That problem is making you feel awful. Just open it further. And you shouldn't have to suffer with that. Just open it even further. Now, each time I open that gap further, it increases the drive for somebody to buy my product. Does that make sense? Every time you open the gap further by talking about the problem, it increases the guide. That's why, you know, a couple of really effective presidents have been Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump at campaigning. Please, I'm not a fan of Republicans or Democrats. They're all wasting our time. It's ridiculous. But where did they study? Where did they pick up their intuition? Television, movies. Donald Trump is great at saying, this villain of Congress, drain the swamp, the villain of the media, they're awful. What's he doing? He's creating a villain that increases the problem that American people have to struggle with, and he's going to help you take on that villain. It's great narrative thinking. Not doing as great of a job. And plus, at some point, you go, I don't think they're the villain, and you seem pretty incompetent, right? So it breaks apart. But that's how story actually works. Now, the key is, if you can actually position the purchasing of your product, the Buy Now button, if you can position the Buy Now button as the resolution to all 3 levels of problems, you're going to sell a ton of product. In a story, it's called the obligatory or climactic scene. So the way a story works is you want there to be a scene, preferably about 9 minutes before the end of the film, in which one thing happens and all of the problems are resolved in the movie. So let's look at some movies. You got Luke Skywalker needs to destroy the Death Star. He's flying his X-Wing fighter through the trench in the Death Star. He's shooting laser beams into the hole in the Death Star. That's what he's got to do. Now, this is usually where I get a letter. Somebody says, you claim to know a lot about the story, but it wasn't a laser beam, it was a proton torpedo. I know because I've gotten that letter. I always send them a book, How to Date. Let's just deal with your external problem first, and then we'll get your internal problem. So forgive me if I butcher this, because I do get letters. I think it's a photon torpedo, not a proton torpedo. Anyway, he's got to shoot the torpedo through the exhaust valve in the Death Star. Somebody also explained to me that it's an exhaust valve. In order to blow up the Death Star. So let's deconstruct that scene. You got Luke Skywalker, he's flying his X-Fighter, he's got to shoot the proton torpedo through the exhaust valve in the Death Star in order to blow it up. What's the external problem? It's physical, it's life or death. He's got to do this or he's going to die. It's a physical thing, he's got to get the proton torpedo through the exhaust valve. Easy, physical. What's the internal problem in that scene? Well, the internal problem was set up an hour and a half earlier at the beginning of the movie when his uncle said, "You're not old enough to be a Jedi." That scene is specifically in the film to give Luke a sense of self-doubt as to whether he has what it takes to be a Jedi. That's the internal problem. And it's carried through the film. Remember when he meets with Yoda, he can't levitate the X-Wing fighter. He can't, because if he levitates it, then that's the climactic scene. He solved the problem. It's got to fall. You can't solve the problem until the end of the movie, so you can't be doing that early on. And that's opening up that internal. Do I have what it takes? Do I have what it takes? I don't know. What's the philosophical? Well, the philosophical is good versus evil. Darth Vader represents evil. And in fact, right before the climactic scene, what the screenwriter is going to do almost every time is they're going to have the bad guy do something really, really bad to remind the audience that he or she is the villain. So Darth Vader shoots one of the other X-Wing fighter guys. He goes spiraling off, shoots R2-D2 in the head. This is the screenwriter saying, don't forget, the villain's a bad guy, the villain's a bad guy. That's why right before the climactic scene in a movie, you're usually going to have the villain go do something really bad. You know, the villain will say, hey, hold on. You know, it's mano a mano. We're at the climactic scene. They're going to fight. Somebody's going to win. And the villain's going to come over here real quick and strangle a cat and come back and go, okay, now let's fight. And what is he doing? He's making everybody realize, first of all, you don't want anybody sympathizing for the villain, right? They've got to be an awful, you know, if Donald Trump said, well, you know, the press isn't that bad. A lot of them do a pretty good job. I don't think they're exactly fair. Some of them are fair. But that's not a good villain. It's got to be, this is the worst. It's fake news. It's all awful. Throw it all out. You're being attacked. That's the only, that's a, it's how you enter people into a narrative. Is it true? No, it's not true. But that's how you enter people into a narrative. And so the external, internal, and philosophical problem are all there. When Luke shoots the proton torpedo through the exhaust valve and blows the Death Star up, the external, listen really closely, the external, internal, and philosophical problem are resolved in one shot. Externally, he saves his physical life, he blows up the Death Star. Internally, he proves that he has what it takes to be a Jedi. Philosophically, good has defeated evil in one shot. Okay? Let's go to a different movie. King's Speech. King George has to deliver a speech without stuttering. What's his external problem? He's got to stutter. What's the internal problem? The internal problem is in the movie when his wife is comforting him and he's crying and he's saying, the wrong man has been chosen as king. I will never live up to my father's legacy. That's the internal problem. What's the philosophical problem? They are beginning a war against the Nazis. It's good guy versus bad guy. 9 minutes before the end of the film, you have the exact same scene that's in Star Wars. The exact same scene. External problem. He's got to deliver that speech. Internal problem. Can he live up to his father's legacy? Philosophical problems. Can the Allies unite under a common message and defeat the Nazis? When he delivers the speech without stuttering, you have the exact same psychological dynamic that you had when Luke Skywalker shot the proton torpedo through the exhaust valve. What happens when an audience, when you clarify or resolve rather an external, internal, and philosophical problem in one shot, what happens in the audience's mind is that sense of clarity and resolution makes a little bit of serotonin seep through the amygdala of your audience's brain and they sense pleasure. Say, Don, why are you bringing this all up? If you can position your product as the resolution to an external, internal, and philosophical problem, you are foreshadowing a climactic scene in your customer's life, and they're going to buy that product. So the language on your website, in your emails, in your elevator pitch, in your Facebook ads, needs to frame and explain that your customers have an external, internal, and philosophical problem. You know how families don't eat together anymore, external. And that's making us all feel guilty because we only have a limited amount of time to actually bond with our kids, internal. Well, I don't think families should have to stress about a meal. They should be connecting instead, philosophical. I'm an at-home chef. What did I just do? You're dealing with an external, internal, and philosophical problem. If you hire me as a chef, we will resolve it all in a climactic scene where you're sitting around the dinner table eating. Brands who figure that out and simplify it and don't overthink it and can repeat that messaging over and over as an exercise in memorization skyrocket, especially if they have a good product that can actually solve the problem. A lot of junk is sold that way, and it's a shame. But if you got a good product, and you figure that out, then the story just builds on itself and begins to virally sell more and more. All right. So the answer to those questions, what is my customer's problem? How is that making them feel? And why is it just plain wrong? Are incredibly important. And what it does is it positions the buy now button as the climactic scene in their story that will resolve their problems. And the human brain has been wired not to click the buy now button, but to enter into a climactic scene for thousands of years, and it's just not going to change. All right, the next thing that we have to do is we have to position ourselves as a guide in the customer's story. Now, they are the hero in the story. They have a problem. We're going to enter into their story now as the guide. Right? So they're the guide in the story, and they're going to help you resolve the problem. Now, who are guides in stories? Guides are very important characters in stories. Yoda in Star Wars is a guide. Obi-Wan Kenobi is a guide. Lionel, the drama teacher in the movie The King's Speech, he's the guide. Haymitch in Hunger Games is the guide. Mr. Miyagi in the movie Karate Kid is the guide. The guide is the character in the story that is there to help the hero win the day. That's why the guide is in the story. Now, here's the biggest paradigm shift you're going to get all day. Never position yourself as the hero in the story. Always position yourself as the guide. Never position yourself as the hero in the story. Always position yourself as the guide. In other words, stop talking about your problems and your goals and start talking about your customers' problems and their goals. You know, I say to my staff all the time, if we go to bed worrying about how much money our customers make rather than how much money we make, we will never suffer for money. We've got to put them first in everything we do, right? We've got to be the guide in the story. The story is about them. There are a couple reasons you don't want to position yourself as the hero in the story. The first reason is the hero is a weak character in the story. They are weak. They're only strong after about, in the last 9 minutes after they've resolved the problem. Until then, they are filled with self-doubt, ill-equipped to get the job done, unwilling to take action. Why would you want to position yourself that way? Position yourself as competent to solve your customers' problems, not weak. Another reason you don't want to position yourself in the story is we all self-identify as protagonists in a story. And if I met you at a cocktail party and you said, Don, what do you do? And I said, well, I've got a messaging framework, kind of an online university platform that's taught in, and I do this, I do that, and my grandfather started the company, and blah, blah, blah. What you're hearing me say is I'm a hero in a story trying to build a company. Now, if I'm a hero in a story, and you are a hero in a story, we are in separate stories. So when you actually position yourself as the hero in a story, you have removed yourself from relevance in your customer's story. They aren't looking for a hero, they're looking for a guide. They're not looking or are even interested in your story. It's one of the big things about StoryBrand that's so deceptive is people come to me all the time and they say, Don, can you help us tell our story? And I say, it's a great way to go bankrupt. There is no reason for you to tell your story. Invite customers into a story. Invite customers into a story. Don't tell your story. No, you want to invite customers into a story. Nobody's interested in your story. Your story is going to remove you from relevancy in your customer's brain. Instead, invite them into a story. The hero is weak. And if you position yourself as a hero, you remove yourself from your customer's story. So how do you position yourself as a guide? Well, let's look at your brand script. By the way, you've got your external, internal, and philosophical problem. Under guide, you have two little things there. One is empathy, and one is authority. Empathy and authority. So the way that you position yourself as the guide in your customer's story is you demonstrate empathy. That is, you care about your customer's problem. Empathy, empathy, empathy. The next is authority. And by authority, what I really mean is competency. You are competent to help them solve that problem. Okay? So you need a statement in your brand script that says, I feel your pain, or customers shouldn't have to struggle with, whatever. You need that. And then you need a statement of competency. We have helped thousands of people solve this problem. That's it. And if you do that, you will be positioned as the guide in your customer's story. Okay, again, no fan of Republicans, no fan of Democrats. In fact, I arguably won't even help them anymore. I wrote a few State of the State speeches for governors and things like that, and I just thought, you guys are not solving very many of our... I feel like they care more about their party than they do about the American people. I really do. And that really bothers me. So I'm over it. But great examples in terms of what to do and what not to do. So I'll use them anyway. We go into Jeb Bush, we go into Miami, meet with Jeb's team. Well, actually, I got a call. Say, can you help Jeb? And I said, there's a problem with me helping Jeb. Jeb's tagline is, Jeb can fix it. Jeb can fix it. He just released tens of millions of dollars worth of branding that said Jeb can fix it. If Jeb can fix it, who's the hero in the story? Jeb. And by the way, what's it? Is it a pressing problem that triggers an emotional response from people because we just have to fix it? If I were to write a movie and say, will you come see my movie? It's about a woman who's trying to fix it. No, it's too vague. So we've literally made Jeb can fix it is 4 words. 4 words with 2 fatal mistakes in them. I don't even know how you do that. How do 50% of the words that you use ruin your chances of becoming president? It's just unbelievable. It's just crazy. Now, they had $112 million in the Right to Rise Super PAC and $15 million in the General Campaign Fund. And they still couldn't get above 3% in the polls. How? Just make 50% of the words you use awful. Right? That's how you do that. He positioned himself as the guide, or as the hero, and he lost. Hillary Clinton, what was her tagline? I'm with her. Who's the hero? She is. And also, I'm with her going where? Doing what? Solving what problem? Heading toward what climactic scene? So, they're all up against a television personality who understands narrative and heads the country toward a vague climactic scene that he stole from Ronald Reagan. Make America great again. Who's going to win? The right candidate? The good candidate? The best candidate? Absolutely not. Never. It will never happen. Now, hopefully, someday, the right candidate, the good candidate, the best candidate will actually have a good message. And that's helpful. By the way, in this current election, Biden is doing two things right. And I think it gives him the slight advantage. He does not have a good narrative. I do not know what this country is going to look like if Biden wins because he hasn't told us. He's not summed it up in a climactic scene, but he's doing two things right. Very, very strong empathy. I feel your pain. I understand your pain. You know, healthcare is personal to me. I lost my wife and a child. I lost my son. Healthcare is personal. Empathy, 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 empathy. And then what he's doing on the coronavirus pandemic and the Trump administration's response to that is he is accusing him, and it's making it stick, that he's incompetent as a leader. So he's expressing his own empathy and taking away the competency of the opponent. And it's working. It's working really well. He needs to be doing a lot more than that. But that is working. Do you see how this works now? If he wants to position himself as a guide, you got to do that. So if you want to position yourself as a guide, you need to come up with an empathetic statement. I feel for families who don't have time to eat together anymore. And when they do, they don't eat healthy. I feel for them. I'm an at-home chef who has cooked for hundreds of families, giving them a chance to get back to the dinner table and actually have a meaningful conversation. What did I just say? Empathy and authority. Now here is one way that I will let you tell your story. But what you're really going to do is you're going to kind of trick people into thinking you're telling your story. And really you're just going to express empathy and authority. Okay? If you go to Dave Ramsey and say, Dave, what's your story? Here's what Dave Ramsey's going to say. He's going to say, well, I used to have really bad financial principles, and I ended up bankrupt. And then I read through Proverbs in the Bible, and it's got some sound financial principles, started using them, and now I'm really rich, and I can help you get rich too. I mean, that's a truncated version of Ramsey's story. You would go home that night after the cocktail party. You'd get into the car with your husband or your wife, and you'd say, I met the most interesting guy. His name is Dave Ramsey, and years ago he went bankrupt, and he had the most amazing story. His life story is really amazing. You know what? Dave never told you his life story. He told you that he empathizes with people who are bankrupt, and he has the authority to get other people out. That's all he told you. He didn't tell you who he was married to, didn't tell you how many kids he has, didn't tell you where he went to college, didn't tell you that he likes hunting and fishing, he didn't tell you his story at all. He tricked you into thinking that he told you his story. Now, what does that mean for us in our efforts to grow our business? When people ask what you do or who you are or for your story, they want to know your story, tell them, well, my story is pretty simple. A long time ago, I struggled with this. Or a long time ago, I met somebody who struggled with this. And I developed a solution, and I've now helped hundreds of people experience that solution so they don't have to live that way anymore. And everybody will think you just told them your story and you didn't. You told them empathy and authority, and you just positioned yourself in their mind as their guide. And they will forever follow you. You created a bond with them. Why? Because your story is actually about them overcoming a problem. And now you are useful. You're useful because you can help them overcome a problem. By the way, it's not true when you get into those 12 or 15 relationships that a human being can actually have. Deep relationships. You have a bunch of acquaintances, a bunch of people that you defend, people in your tribe, people that you work with, people that you love even. But in those 12 to 15 deep relationships, none of this is true. Tell your story. Talk about where you went to college. It's different when you get to the level of we're now actually creating a more intimate bond. I'm just talking about surface level branding with potential customers. Because life would be pretty miserable if nobody actually wanted to hear your story. But those are friendships and family. What we're talking about here are relationships with customers. Position yourself as the guide in the story, and you will win the day. If I really believe that if Hillary Clinton would have changed her tagline from I'm with her to she's with us, she would have won. If she would have just changed it from I'm with her to she's with us, she would have won. The problem with that is that's actually a state of the heart. It's not just words. It's not just words. It has to be a state of the heart. You have to actually really put them first. Actually, I think if she would have just had a tagline, "It's my turn," she would have won. Because we've all kind of gone, "Yeah, it's kind of her turn. She's been up there for a long time," right? But she gave us no reason to vote for her. And so when people went to the polls, they said, well, do I choose a great America? Or do I choose to be with her going somewhere where I don't know where we're going? What's the choice? There's no other choice. Would you like a cheeseburger for lunch, or would you like an empty plate? I guess I'll have the cheeseburger. We've got to give our customers something tangible to think about. Okay, we're going to move pretty quickly through these last parts, but here you need to next give your customer a plan. What is a 3-step plan you can take them through that will help them solve their problem? Now, look where we are in the story that we're inviting customers into. We've identified something they want. Now they're interested. They're no longer daydreaming. They're paying attention. We opened 3 levels of story loops. Now they're actually biting at the bit, wanting to buy our product. Then we positioned ourselves as a competent guide to help them. All of that was free. Well, now we want to ask them to buy our product. And you know what? They're not going to do it. Because this is the first time in the story that we're inviting them into where they have to put skin in the game. They have to pay money or time. And it's not just about money and time. What if they're embarrassed? What if they're embarrassed about having lost their money by buying our product and having it not work? What if they lose self-respect? It's over. So what you want to do is you want to make it easier for them to buy from you. You want to lift the fog. No customer will move into a fog. They won't, if they want to buy, which they do, they want to buy at this point. But they're scared. They're scared that if they buy from you, they could get ripped off. They're scared if they buy from you, they're not sure how this is going to work. It's confusing. Nobody moves into confusion. Nobody walks into a fog. It's too threatening. They'd be exposed. So what we want to do is we want to say, hey, look, it's easy to buy from me. If you would like for me to be your at-home chef, there's just 3 phases. One is I just come over to your house. We have about a 1-hour conversation about how you live and how you like to eat. Step 2 is I come and I cook a meal for you guys, and it's at cost. It usually costs about $30, and I feed your whole family. I'm there for 2 hours. $30 to feed your whole family. Super easy. Step 3 is if you want a schedule of me coming once a month, twice a week, whatever, we'll work on a pricing structure for me to be able to do that. I've got time next Thursday. Do you want me to come over and talk? How many more yeses are you going to get than just hire me to be your at-home chef? What did I do? I made it feel very easy and safe to do business with me because I created baby steps. In fact, Dave Ramsey in his stuff calls it baby steps. You want to give people baby steps that they can take in order to do business with you. I'll tell you this, the magic number is 3. 4 is too many. 5, you won't close any sales. The magic number is 3. You'll close sales with 4. You will not close sales with 5. Magic number is 3. Give them 3 steps. You say, Don, there's way more than 3 steps as it relates to doing business with me. Break it down into 3 phases. The discovery phase, the planning phase, the execution phase. And you'll do more business. All right? That is also in your brand script. Summarize your plan. 1, 2, and 3. Next, you've got to call your customer to action. You've got to actually say, it's time to buy. If I go to your website, I want to be able to circle how many times you have a buy now button or a schedule an appointment button or call us today with a phone number. The direct calls to action need to be very, very clear. Do not be passive. Some of us feel like we're being direct and we're actually being very indirect. We've got things on our website that say something like learn more or get started. That's passive language. It's weak, weak language. I want you to say buy now. Drive directly to the hoop. What you want is for your customer to see something or read something that they need to accept or reject. Notice my at-home chef example. I've got time next Thursday to spend an hour with you in your home. That is a direct call to action. Here's a passive call to action. I've got some time on my schedule. Call me if you're interested. That is a passive call to action. We want direct calls to action. Your sales will go up. So will your rejections. Sales and rejections go up together. Make sense? So we don't like rejections, and so we don't get sales. And we don't like rejections or beating people over the head with this offer, so we say things like get started or learn more, which just confuses people. We need to give them something to accept or reject. Ladies, when you were younger and you were dating and all that kind of stuff before you're married, if a guy walked up to you and said, learn more, would you be remotely interested in continuing that conversation? I'm seeing a bunch of people laughing. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Why? It's weird. If it's weird at a cocktail party, it's weird on your website. Stop saying it. Or worse, if you say get started, that's a lawsuit getting started is what that is. So no, we don't want to use something that's very clear. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I'd love to take you on a date. You want to get coffee one morning this week before work. Super safe. Now she has something to accept or reject, and if it's my dating story, it's a lot of rejection, and then finally there's Betsy. So accept or reject, and what that is it's considerate to the person that you're actually talking to, right? And so you want to give your customer something to accept or reject, but don't make it a mystery where you're hoping this thing goes. I want you to buy a product from me because I know it will solve your problem. So buy now and get started. Make your calls to action direct. Okay, finally, we've got two other things that need to be in your brand script and in your messaging. And those are success and failure. We need to paint a picture of what our customers' lives will look like if they buy our product. And we also need to mention what their lives will look like if they do not buy our product. These are stakes in the story. The stakes must be high. If you remove the stakes from the story, you really ruin the story. If Liam Neeson is on an airplane and he's flying across the Atlantic, and he's going over to rescue his daughter who has been kidnapped, another one, I think he's got many, and he gets a call, and it's the London authorities, and they say, Liam, you won't believe this. Your daughter was, in fact, kidnapped, but she was kidnapped by college friends. It's a prank. She's safe. She's happy. She's here in the police station. We know you're already on your way. Listen, she's hoping that you guys can still spend some time together going shopping in the West End and talking about grad school. And then it's 90 minutes of Liam Neeson shopping with his daughter, and every dress she tries on is half price and fits great, and she's clearly going to Dartmouth. Boring story? Boring story. Why is it boring? You removed the stakes. Nothing can be won or lost. So what we have to do in the story that we're inviting customers into is we must define what will be won or lost if they do or do not buy our product or service. What will be won or lost if they do or do not buy our product or service? And you're going to put that in the brand script here. I also want you to notice something else about the brand script, both at mystorybrand.com and on this sheet of paper. There's a bunch of lines for success and not very many lines for failure. That's because you don't want to overdo failure. You'll come off as heavy-handed, and you don't want to do that. You just want to lightly mention whatever it is. You know, if you buy my product, you don't have to wake up in a fog anymore. If you buy my product, customers will no longer pass you up. Just lightly mention, because if you, studies show, it's in my book, it's been Building a Story Brand, the studies show that if you overdo failure, people's survival mechanism kicks in because they don't want to hear too much bad news. So they'll stop listening to you. So lightly include failure. You cannot overdo success. You can mention it over and over and over 1,000 times in 50 different ways, and it will all motivate the customer. What does their life look like if they do or do not buy your product or service? All right?